This is the place where you're entitled to Brad's opinion. And now for your host, Brad Allard.
A beautiful day in Burleson. Hope you're enjoying everybody's day off. I had the day off. They canceled school back in my day, by golly. We went to school regardless. Well, that's not quite true. So,
They had
Taylor,
school
where
back
you at?
then?
Yeah, back in the old chalk and slate, or back in when I
Yeah.
sat around and in togas listening to Aristotle. But so, where are you right now? You at your house? At your
Yeah, home
place?
studio.
Yeah, I'm studio.
At
Yeah,
my
so am
house.
I, obviously. And you can tell a concession to the cold. I'm not wearing my usual Hawaiian flare t-shirt, so I've got this sweatshirt on because it is chilly out here, and I'm right by the window, and it looks pretty until you realize you walk out there. It's not snow, it's ice. It's not the same thing. You hear the crunching and all that. But anyway, they say this is going to continue for a while. I am a weather agnostic, though. I have to see it to believe it, and I really didn't think we'd have it, but there you are. Now, so y'all be safe out there. And since you've got all this extra free time, you can hear me rant and rave about whatever. Today, I'm going to talk about AP African American U.S. history courses. And it's a topic I'm going to approach, hopefully, be understood as to what the message I'm trying to present, because what's being done in the media is it's presenting it as if you have questions or if you oppose this, then you're by nature all racist. And that's not really the case. It's not racist to have questions about this particular program, but it's being portrayed as the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, wants to erase Black history. I'm going to go through all of that after I go through the sponsors, but I am going to make a couple of things clear. I am not here to promote Ron DeSantis as a potential presidential candidate. He may or may not be. And whether I vote for him or not depends on his opponents and who's in the primaries and all this other stuff. Normally I vote in the Republican primaries, but he does not have my vote as of now. But so let's not get into this. I'm here to make him look better, but I am here to show that the media has portrayed this very, very unfairly. And the content of African American U.S. history at the AP level, there are some questions about it and its objectivity and its legitimacy as history and that need to be asked. But anyway, I'll get to that just after these brief commercial announcements. Thank you, Daniel. CrossFit Burleson, 317 Southwest Wilshire. Hope you are doing well, staying fit. I know the kids are probably home and you're probably eating great. My parents hated snow days. How about yours, Taylor? Did they have any comments on mine? Always did. Like, well, my day
No,
we
they're
went and blah, blah, blah. And,
neutral about it.
Yeah, well, what can you say? Here I am sharing with the various groups. So boom, 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 boom. Okay, there we go. Now, back to the matter at hand. Thank you, Daniel. CrossFit Burleson, 317 Southwest Wilshire. Hope you're doing well. Hope you and the kids are having fun and whatever this slush is or whatnot. Hope you're staying warm. Thank you to Shandy at the Stogsdill group. She's home with her kids, and parents will go crazy if this goes on too long. But anyway, Shandy's got 2-3 homes she'll be closing on in a couple of weeks, so she's really doing pretty decently, and there's a reason for that because she knows what she's talking about. She is very knowledgeable in real estate. And also check out her election page, if you will, because she's running for place 4. She has drawn a quality opponent, and so we're fortunate in that. And so, but so make up your mind, Burleson school voters. You have a choice to be made soon, and Shandy is a great candidate. So is her opponent, Dallas Owen. But I'm here to promote Shandy. Tell you the truth right now. Anyway, Shandy Stogsdill. At the Stogsdill group. Also, Our Place Restaurant. Right now, Otto's in Chicago, I guess, enjoying the warm weather. But this is a good time to go with this cold weather. Now, I'm not sure if they're open today, but if they are, it's a good place. If you're out there, but had to be out there, it's a good place to stop by and warm up with some coffee or something, or get a decent lunch. They will be open as soon as possible. I know that much. They have people depending on them, customers and wait staff alike. Okay, so thank you, Otto, for all that you do. Thank you to Chris over at Wild Cigar. They're promoting not just a certain line of cigars this week, but they're also promoting themselves. Time to watch the Super Bowl. A good place to watch the Super Bowl game. Go and have a cigar, have a drink, watch with your friends on the big screen. It's going to be a lot of fun. So check that out. They've been doing stuff with the playoffs all along. and it's a good place to go. So Wild Cigar over at the Standard. Also, thank you to Tiffany. Her magazine's coming out this week. Also, check out locallifetx.com if you find out what's going on more currently, I guess. But she also, because she updates it quite often. But also, what I like best about the magazine is it goes to 30,000 homes. And so your advertisements will be placed in the hands of a lot of people in this area. It goes to most homes in the Burleson, Joshua, South Tarrant County area. So Local Life Magazine is a good place to check out what's going on. Also, Southern Jim, their Valentine's is coming up very quickly, and I was talking to Gayla last week, and she's got Valentine's promotions. They'll, even if you want it wrapped and all this, they'll do all that for you. If you come and give a gift of some sort, if you think, well, I bought jewelry at Christmas, my duty is done, gentlemen, you're sadly mistaken. So Valentine's is coming up very quickly. Or if you want repairs, you want appraisals, you want designs, you can do all of this. It's a full service gemstone and jewelry store. Thank you also to HotWorks. I had Michelle on yesterday with her friend Lisa Flynn from Cryo 3, and it was a very, very interesting show. It talks about health and the really the two ways that they kind of like are on the opposite, not opposite in the spectrum, but Lisa does, cold therapy, cryotherapy, and Michelle does infrared workouts, and they work together, not in opposition. And it's a lot of people, have a lot of crossover clients because they do a lot to help with joint pain, with inflammation, with muscle pain, and whatnot. So HotWorks over at 731 is a good place to go and work out these problems if you have those kind of problems, and if you just want an infrared workout to stay in shape. Also, thank you to Melissa, Texas Farm Bureau. I bet you'll be hearing some clients now with all this bad weather. The auto accidents kind of pile up, and if you're insured by Texas Farm Bureau insurance, you'll be taken care of. So if you have to be out there and something bad does happen to your automobile, then you're going to be protected. And so Texas Farm Bureau Insurance, call Melissa Harmon, 682-804-0534. That's 682-804-0534. Also, we have a couple of events going on in town here. We have the coat drive. It's going until February 14th. So bring a new or lightly used coat and receive a free exam, free x-rays, an adjustment if you need one. If you need more than that, you can work out some sort of plan with Dr. Dias and his crew over Trinity Chiropractic. Trinity Chiropractic is over on Summercrest and Allsbury. In fact, it's a neighbor of Cryo 3, Lisa Flynn's outfit that we talked with yesterday. So it's over on Summercrest and Allsbury at the Trinity Chiropractic. Also, our friend Jennifer would have you know at the Harvest House are trying to get enough money for a fridge with the Fridge Fund. They need $20,000 to help you get it installed and bought. They already have about a third. Well, they need a total of 30,000. They have a third of that already, so they need the rest of the 20,000 from us. So together we can do this because this is going on until the 17th of February, and she'll be on hopefully pretty soon. It's just a very busy time, and of course the weather impacts a lot of that. But the Fridge Fund will help people go in and select groceries, not just a bag of canned stuff or whatnot, but it's also going to be frozen and refrigerated foods, and they'll have the dignity of self-service, and that's a big thing. It really is. I've come to learn that from both her and Debbie Meeman, where it promises that the ability to select your own groceries means a lot to people in need. So anyway, the Fridge Fund, check it out at the Harvest House. All right, here's the drill. All right. I taught AP history for at least 20 years. I taught AP government economics, AP European history, AP comparative government. I have a pretty good background in AP level courses. The only AP course I don't think I taught that was in social studies was human geography. And I'm glad. And I have no problem with that. So I have a pretty good understanding of what goes on in an AP class. I have a pretty good understanding of what goes on with these AP programs. Every summer, BISD required me, if I want to continue to teach it, to take at least a week of training. Usually it was at TCU. I did it for both history and government for, 24 of my 26, 26 years or so at BISD, or Burleson High School at least. So I think I could consider myself pretty well experienced in AP courses. And what bothers me about the AP African American History course is not the content that we are focusing on a subsector of American history. What bothers me is the content and how it's presented. It is not an objective education in Black American history. It is from what I've seen and the readings I've seen from the excerpts of the curriculum, it is designed to lead students towards certain political attitudes and conclusions. That's not education. Okay. That's why I'm not really in favor at all of having AP African American history taught in our schools as it's currently composed. Because it is designed not to generate an understanding of African American history in our country. It's designed to create activists in it. Now, there's about 3 basic approaches I'm taking about the course, and should we be teaching it or not? The one thing I will push back against is because I don't want Black people to understand their history. That is a complete and categorical lie when people say that people who oppose this curriculum don't want Black history to be taught. That is a lie in the media, and that is the slander that's going against Ron DeSantis. You look at what goes on in any AP U.S. history course, and it is impossible to teach it without a strong component of non-white history. I know this because I did it, and the curriculum demanded it. My students would have never passed an AP U.S. history test, which is exceptionally difficult, by the way. But none of them would have passed had I omitted a thorough coverage of non-white, non-male history. Period. The essay questions, if you're not familiar with the AP process, this has been a little while since I've done it. History. The last 4 years of my tenure at BHS, I did economics and government, and one of my colleagues did history, but I still had a hand in it, and from our conversations and because my daughter took it, and on and on. You have what they call a document-based question at the beginning, where you have a prompt and you're supposed to answer based on your own knowledge and with these facsimiles of and copies of documents and quotes and whatnot, and try to create an essay based on that. And then you had a pair of essays, and you had to choose one from each pair, and each pair had at least one or more non-white history, feminist history, Black American history, Asian American history, if you're dealing with immigration issues in California, things like that. It would be impossible to get through an AP US history exam without having a thorough knowledge in non-white history. You would fail the course. Then you go back to the multiple choice questions, and at least a third of them out of the 60 dealt with culture and people and events that were non-white centric, so to speak. So this idea that you're being taught or being kept from learning about Black history unless you have this course is a total pile of rubbish. AP US history and AP courses in general are the closest thing we have to a national curriculum. There is no AP test for Texas or AP test for California. It's the same test worldwide, in American-based high schools across the world. So the same test your kids took at Burleson or Centennial High School is the same test some kid in New York or California or Illinois took. Same exact one. Unless if you had a situation where you missed, and they have a makeup exam, which is the makeup exam was universal also. So like one time we had a very serious flu outbreak, and so we had to take the makeup exam 3 weeks later. Everybody had that same situation, took the same exam. That's my point. AP US, AP Chemistry, AP Physics, AP Calculus, AP English, you name the course, that is universal across AP courses. The curriculum we get every year, we get, at the time it was books, and then it became course downloads, and it would go over changes in not just approaches and how to teach it, but also in the curriculum itself, which is quite extensive. About 4 pages of what the AP board said we need to be teaching, and there'd be large sections of it we're dealing with non-white history. That's why I'm so irritated about this AP African American business. Is not so much it's teaching a subsection of history. We do that with European history, and you could do that. I believe they have other world histories. They have AP World History for that matter, which also is highly diverse. But they also have subsections of that. It's the fact that it is false to say that this is the only way that Black children are going to learn about themselves. And so Ron DeSantis says we're not going to teach this course in Florida. Why? The truth of the matter is that AP African American course heavily leans towards authors and leaders that are not just left of center, but radical even. It quotes people like Ibram X. Kendi and the 1619 Project and other Black authors and leaders that are not the mainstream of even Black American politics or thought. And the last unit in particular is designed to generate activism, not further education. Furthermore, it does emphasize things of Black history that, yes, are negative, but there's no counterbalance to it. And what I mean by that is, you look at U.S. history, the story of the Black American is one of, it's sad in a lot of cases, it's one of tragedy, it's one of horrific conditions in slavery and Jim Crow, and all that is taught in AP U.S. history. In AP U.S. history, I taught Jim Crow. And we read Frederick Douglass, we read Martin Luther King, we read Malcolm X, we read W.E.B. Du Bois, we read Booker T. Washington, we read Phyllis Wheatley, the Black poet from the Revolutionary era. Every unit we had a strong non-white component to it. It had to. Even if I were, a cracker down to the bone, I would still, if I were teaching that course and trying to get kids to pass that test, I would have to have taught it. Now, obviously, I hope you believe I don't think that way at all. I encouraged it. I encouraged one of the most profound readings I could give to students. I gave to some of my students who I think had a greater interest in this, was the autobiography of Frederick Douglass, the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass. The first one. He wrote 3 autobiographies. This is the first one where he detailed his escape and his post slavery life. And then we get to the 1960s, and we were reading like King and X and Black Power and Stokely Carmichael and all these. And he said, well, those are radicals. Yes, but it's also being taught in a context of within American history in total. And here's an example of what I was referring to earlier. I can't remember the exact year. I'm going to say 96 or 97. It was a bit while ago. The exams are always in the first 2 weeks of May, and this one in the AP US has almost always been on the first Friday of May. About 10 days prior to that, we did a full 2-day dive in my history classes on the differences between King and X, between Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, between Black nationalism and isolation versus integration, or not isolation, separatism is the better word, but between King's version and Malcolm X's version of the role of the American Black. The day of that AP exam, they do the multiple choice, and they have like a 10-minute break, and then they go back into the library, and they're going to do the document-based question. And I'm looking through the window because that's always the document-based question. Almost always is the make or break point in these exams. They open it up and they start laughing, and I go, I didn't know what they were laughing about until they don't come out, and I could see. I'm not allowed to see the multiple choice questions, but I could see that they can give me the essay questions. It was a comparison of King and X. So had I been of the mind to say it's not important, they would have failed that exam. Turns out it was the best grades I ever had on that test. My point is this. When you're talking about the Black experience in America, if you have a properly taught course, particularly at the AP level, they're going to get a full education on it. Now, if you want to dive further into Black studies, that's what universities are for. Universities offer this. Fine, great, go do it. But it's the idea that if AP African American history isn't offered, they're not going to get a decent Black education, so to speak, an education on their history, on themselves, on people that struggle for them. That's just not true. And Ron DeSantis is getting pegged as a racist. One of the headlines in the New York Times today on its editorials is, why does Ron DeSantis want to erase Black history? He does not. Florida law mandates they teach many of the things I've been discussing. Texas law mandates it. Texas law, if you're going to be teaching the course according to the way the state of Texas has designed it, and the Burleson ISD has assigned it, then you're going to be teaching non-white history. For those who are not in the loop, we have what are called TEKs. Most of you may have heard of that. TEKs are basically the components that which we have to uh, cover over any proper course of any kind, including history and government, whatever. And you're supposed to say, these are the things that need to be discussed in your class. And you look at the Texas history TEKs, and there's a great deal of non-white history, Hispanic history in Texas's case is also included. You know, these leaders of Texas Hispanic culture and history and Black history. And it talks about the difficulties under Jim Crow and Reconstruction. It talks about the Civil Rights Movement, and you know, so any course, even if it's not AP, by the way, I'm focusing on AP, but this also applies to on-level courses. Any course that's properly taught has to teach this. So Ron DeSantis isn't trying to erase Black history. What he is trying to erase is, first of all, a course that is designed to lead students into certain political attitudes and activism, as opposed to, shall we say, you know, a thorough education of history, and one's evaluations could be based on that. It's being led to try to create a generation of activists. If that's what you want to do, listeners, or, you know, if you've got any younger listeners, if a person wants to be a Black activist, get after it. But they have universities for that all over the place. Most universities, state universities, offer those kind of focuses. Women's history, Black history, queer history in some cases, and that's all. It's, you know, that's the university. They could do what they want and whatnot, and when you be, you know, upset or could care less, either one. But the high school is different, and so I guess I just took real umbrage at some of these articles are talking about how people who oppose this, they only are doing so for racist reasons. I said, I'm thinking, have you ever been in an AP U.S. history course that's properly taught? Have you been in even a decent high school history class that's properly taught? They're going to be talking about these things. And they're not going to put sugar on it either and say, well, it wasn't so bad. Most of the history teachers I know are hardly what you call activists on the far right. Now, that doesn't mean they're all liberals. Most of the history teachers are coaches, and they were good teachers in most cases. There's a couple that got done without, but most of them are pretty good. And they're not interested in creating activists. They're interested, okay, here's what I'm supposed to teach. Here's what they're going to be tested on at the state level or at the AP level. And therefore, I will do it. I don't think I have ever encountered a teacher at Burleson High School that said, I am not going to teach Black history because I don't agree with it, or I don't think it's necessary. Now, let's talk about maybe those few exceptions that exist out here in the country of teachers that really do have racist motivations and don't want to teach Black history. Then that's something for their district to deal with and their community to deal with. You're not going to legislate a racist out of the classroom. You're going to remove him or her from the classroom because that person is violating state law and state required mandates. If I pointedly refused to teach a section of the TEKs because I didn't feel like it, I didn't like it, I had problems with it, I could lose my certificate. Would I? Probably not, but I could be removed from the class, and I could be dismissed from employment for being insubordinate. Burleson High School, Burleson ISD as a whole, does not support racist teaching, but that goes both ways. They're not going to be so unracist that they're going to allow indoctrination in the classrooms either. All right. I know that teachers have political biases, and most students don't really care about that. And they knew I was pretty conservative, where they knew that my colleague next door, a woman I'm very fond of still, but had more liberal biases, but they also enjoyed the counteract between us. We'd joke about it, and I'd walk her into her room and say, so we're creating a bunch of liberals today? And she'd walk in, so is this the meeting of the young Republicans today? And that just, you know, jokes like that. My former colleague, Mr. Wittenberg, and I, who's freezing his can off in Minnesota, I hope he's rethinking that decision. He and I would joke about it all the time, and the students loved it because they knew that we believed what we believed. We also could have this great relationship with each other without, you know, politics being the dividing point. I'm getting off the track here, but my point is this. Any history course worth its salt, AP or on level, will do what this African-American course purports to do without the indoctrination, without the leading to conclusions, without the the emphasis on authors like Ibram X. Kendi or Hannah Nicole Jones, the author of the 1619 Project. If those are the things that we want our students to study, well, there are other schools besides the American Public High School to do it. Here's a second point I'd have about it. Before we involve ourselves with assets, resources, teachers' time in the schedule, and students' time in the schedule, we got to make sure we're doing the other things right as well. Before we start involving ourselves in more um, the types of study that require, a bit more special nature to it, before we start spending money on textbooks, before we start, training the teachers, before we start incorporating that in teacher schedules, we got to make sure we're doing the other stuff right as well. And in a lot of cases across the country, we are not. Okay, here's an example of how some of these school districts can get way off the course on all this indoctrination. Washington, D.C. is the worst school system in the country. It's a shame that our nation's capital has the worst school system in the country. I mean, I'm not being figurative. I'm saying that's what the data shows. 9% of Black young men and women graduate with a level of math understanding that's sufficient to their grade. Okay. 91% of Black high school graduates in Washington, D.C. schools are below standards in math, and about 85% of them are below standards in reading. How are we going to fix that problem, according to Washington, D.C.? Well, they're launching this very, very detailed new plan to include DEI in their education. Now, DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion. So they're going to make sure that in all classes, DEI, this kind of woke kind of perspective is included, but they're not teaching the kids how to read and write. And it is also the most expensive school district per student in the country. They spend $30,000 per student, and they're only getting 9% of their young Black men and young Black women proficient in math. But they're going to be taught DEI in a DEI program. School districts across the country, particularly in the major urban areas in the Northeast and Midwest and out in California, are spending millions, including billions of dollars collectively, on programs not designed to help them with reading and writing and arithmetic, but with all these type of woke type of policies. Now, I'm going to take a sidestep here. One of the things I've always been reluctant to criticize American education is I don't want people to think I'm talking about BISD. BISD doesn't have this problem. Now, they have problems. Hey, they'll tell you that too. They have students that need to do better. They have students that they're trying to pull scores up in various subgroups in various topics. It's a struggle every year. They still have students that are below standard, and they know it. And they spend millions of dollars in remediation and in tutorials and in help and other programs. Ask the school board member of your choice, or talk to whomever you want to in administration, but they will tell you, because I was involved in it. I know this happened because I was involved in it. Is that we had tons of remediation and tutorials for those students, but before we could go off onto these flights of fancy or whatever else you want to call it, we had to make sure those guys got across the finish line sufficiently, and for the most part, we did. Your local district, I'm not going to tell you is perfect. Dr. Jimerson would not tell you it's perfect. No school board member will tell you it's perfect. But I can tell you right now, many of the issues that you see in the Northeast and in Chicago and in Indianapolis and Cleveland and Milwaukee, which are terrible school systems, Milwaukee and Cleveland, Chicago in particular, just awful. A lot of it, they spend 2.5 to 3 times more money than we spend as a state on education, and they get zero results for it. So before we do these courses, let's teach our kids at least to be proficient, to be an adult in the real world. Now, if they want to pursue these kind of studies, I don't have a problem if UTA offers this course. I don't have to take it. And for that matter, AP African American History is an elective. It's not a required course. That point, I guess, gets lost. It's not a required course, but I'm talking about from the point of view of, should we be focusing on these kind of studies when we need to make sure we're doing the assigned duties well? One of the authors I read about this is Jonah Goldberg, who I quote all the time. And he said, look, the reason why people distrust government is when they thought that we're going to do all these great things for you, we're going to do this. They say, well, fine, but I want you to take care of the mundane stuff. Don't, as a city government, don't talk about all these great plans when I need my trash picked up. As a state, don't talk to me about all these great plans you're going to have in the educational system when we have below standard schools across the state. Don't talk to me at the national level about how the government's going to do this, that, and the other when I can't hardly deal with getting my Social Security or get the IRS to cooperate and all this other stuff or do the job right. So, that do those things first, and once you've shown the skill and a mastery of those mundane, required everyday tasks, then maybe we can talk about expanding your profile or portfolio, maybe, and there you are. But I want to go back to this one point, and Goldberg makes it very clear. He wrote an article for the Dispatch about it, and he talks about how any AP course in history or any course in general talks about these things. And that's where I get some of this information about the data and such. But he also talks about exactly what I'm talking about, and that is that the AP courses and traditional courses, if they're taught as designed, will do exactly what this course does. So when they talk about DeSantis being a racist, they're using it as a political hammer, and they're using the schools to do it. And a lot of the teacher unions in Florida are hammering about it, and they're making stuff on Twitter about how they're having to censor their curriculum and all this other stuff. And it's ridiculous. It's not true. By the way, here's a quote from the AP African American History document itself. Okay, the document itself has not been publicly released, but it got leaked to a few outlets, and it was given to the Florida government, and I guess that's where the leak came from. But basically, it's not been published online somewhere. They're going to revamp it. But here's a quote from the document itself, proposing AP African American history. While we know that we cannot have an African American study course in which slavery is absent, this feedback indicates that the AP course should endeavor to expand student understanding and not repeat instructions students have already encountered. So they're all but admitting they already have been exposed and encountered this kind of material. You may want to expand it, but it's like it's not being taught. They admit it's being taught. They ought to say it should not repeat instructions students have already encountered. So the AP people themselves are saying it's being taught in Florida. And so any young man or young woman that wants to know more about their Black past and their heritage, fantastic. Go to University of Florida. Take an online course. Go to local community college if they offer it. But the idea that they're not going to encounter it unless they take this particular course is rubbish. And any idea that it's solely racism that is preventing this from happening is also rubbish. So that's why if I'm spooled up a little about it, is because these are the kind of tactics that divide this country. These are the kind of things that divide this country. People that are from the left and from the right, in some cases, use these kind of things to divide us because they try to portray things as they are not. The New York Times is wrong when they say that DeSantis is operating on political and racist motives. Does he have political motives? Who doesn't? But maybe he does. But he's not going to allow himself to be called a racist to do it. That's not a vote getter. It might get a few votes on the far right, but it ain't going to get it from moderate Republicans. And people that talk about how he's preventing this from passing, he knows more about this program than they do, because his government has copies of it, which you don't, which I don't. It's not available. But the AP board has said we are going to reconfigure it. Well, that's a problem, because the Illinois governor stepped in 2 days ago or last week, and said, well, we're not going to adopt this course unless it remains this way. So basically what the AP board has got themselves in a bind. They have to either satisfy Florida or satisfy Illinois. And if they satisfy Florida, Illinois is not going to teach it. If they satisfy Illinois, Florida is not going to teach it. Now, the AP board has not been without controversy in the past. It's been over not just history and government, but also literature-based courses and things of that nature. I remember the political arguments a decade ago. Is the AP board getting too liberal? Are they focusing too much on this, that, and the other? This is nothing new. But that's just the nature of when you have a social studies based course, you're going to have perspectives and all this to be dealt with. However, I'm going to kind of sum this up because I think I've hit it pretty hard, and I think you understand where I'm going. I am not opposed to the study of Black history in school. I am very much in favor of it. But I just say my point is it's being done in the AP US history courses. It's being done in the on-level courses, assuming they're properly taught. And if they're not being properly taught, that's a district problem, not a curriculum problem. All right. If we have a teacher at one of the high schools or junior highs that's purposely omitting Black history, then that's for their principal and their superiors to deal with, not mandate some law, because they're already violating the mandates of law. I'm not opposed to this being taught at the college level because I don't really not only have no control over it, I don't care. I don't care if UT teaches this. I don't go to UT. I don't have to take it if it did. And if a student wants to involve himself or herself in Black studies, get after it. I don't care. I don't know what kind of job that'll lead to other than political activism, but that's not my problem either. Now, if you as a citizen think that we're not doing a good enough job in the classroom teaching this type of material, then it's up to you also to make sure that they are. You have every right to view the curriculum of the BISD's required they have to teach. It's an open document. As far as a teacher's particular syllabus, I know at the college level it is a requirement that I posted online. So it's my Hill College and DBU syllabi are public viewing. As far as the high schools, I'm not sure if it's public viewing, but I've had teachers when I was teaching high school, can I see your curriculum? And I'd just publish it out there. Sure, have a copy. I'd either attach it to an email, or in the earlier days, I'd make them a copy and send it home with the kid or mail it to them or whatever. Most teachers I know, like, here it is. I know it's no big deal. As far as I know, it may be public knowledge now, but on their Google pages or whatever, or Schoology, or whatever system they're using nowadays. But if you really think that they're not teaching it enough, or that they're teaching it in a biased way, and your child's not getting the proper education in any subject for that matter, there are means available to you to make that happen. And if you have a teacher that's reluctant or obstinate about it, go to his or her superior, and I promise you there'll be a knock on that teacher's door and saying, we expect you to cooperate. Fortunately, I never had that happen to me, but I'm just saying that I guarantee you call the vice principal of the high school and say, so-and-so, Mr. So-and-so, Miss So-and-so won't let me see what she's teaching or he's teaching. Oh, you'll get response. It's not a state secret. It's not privileged information. So you as a teacher, I'll say it again, you as a parent are entitled to know what's being taught in your child's classroom. So when you see people make these broad brush statements, well, we're not teaching Black history and American history. Ask them how they know that and investigate it for yourself. And if Burleson ISD decided to teach African American AP US history, I don't know if there's anything to stop it as of now, but I think it would be a mistake because you're going to be replicating what's already been done in the classroom. And the purposes of AP is not to create activists. And for what has been seen in the curriculum and the syllabi of this particular course, that is the ultimate goal and conclusion of it. Before I got on and talked about this, my wife made sure, don't sound like some sort of, racist white boy that's random. I promise you with every fiber of my being, I thought Black history was critical, maybe more critical than most in this community to teach Black history. Why? Because we all know about a couple generations ago, and some of those feelings still linger, but a couple generations ago, Burleson did not have the best reputation for racial relations. In my first decade of teaching, they were almost all white or Hispanic, and most of them were white. Now, beginning in the last decade, we've got more diverse, which I'm on board with 100%. But I thought it was exceptionally critical when I first arrived in this community It wasn't so much I was dealing with a bunch of Klansmen in the classroom. That wasn't it at all. They were just ignorant of it. And I thought, I need to make sure they understand that what their history is about, good, bad, and indifferent. They need to see Jim Crow as much as they need to see the more heroic aspects of our history. They need to see the travails of slavery and Reconstruction, like they need to see, the heroics of World War II. So I took it as a mission almost to make sure that these kids got at least a pretty decent background in Black history, because I thought these kids, again, I'm not going to call them all racist or anything like that. They're nothing like that. They just didn't know. And Burleson was not the community in which they would encounter that on their own. Most parents I dealt with had no problem at all with me teaching Frederick Douglass, Martin Luther King, even Malcolm X. They wanted their kids to have a broad understanding. And I think and when I got into AP US, I was going to make sure, by God, that these guys understand all the aspects of U.S. history, good, bad, and not so, or a little both. And I don't consider myself either a forerunner or a saint. A lot of my colleagues felt the same way. They thought it was very important that our kids get exposed to this kind of material so they know. So to sum all this up, if you don't think your kid's getting a sufficient non-white education, find out. I'm pretty sure he or she is. And for that, we ought to be glad. And we ought to be glad that BSD's not involving itself in all of these political controversies. We don't need it. We already got enough crap going on around here already. We don't need this. But again, I'm going to have Shandy on the show again talking about school board. I have a tentative date with Dallas Owen, who are the two declared candidates, and I'm going to be asking these questions. I'm going to ask them these questions about, is this being taught, and how do you know? And you should have the same answers for yourself. Pass this along to your friends, particularly those with kids in schools. I hope I was clear. I hope I made my point clear about African American U.S. history and its appropriate role in our educational process, but this is not the vehicle to do it. This AP African American U.S. course is not the vehicle to do it. And I guess I'm done, because I think I hammered you pretty good. Thursday, hopefully, if the weather clears, which I have no idea, I'm going to have Megan and Summer on from Next Step Women's Center. If the roads are still bad, we may be back here again, and I'll be talking about something that occurred to me about 3:30 in the morning. Taylor, are your plans been changed by all this?
Oh, just working from home instead of a coffee shop. So
The good thing about it is, we have this access to do these things now. Back in snow days, were nothing. You just still enlightened, frightened. So we'll see you Thursday at 11. I don't know if we'll be in the studio. I don't know if we'll be here, but thank you for listening. Pass this on to your friends. If you have any comments or criticisms or complaints, if you have comments, send them to me. If you have complaints, send them to Taylor. So we'll see you next week.